Ukrainians are literally just devastating the front lines of the Russians using high tech drone aircraft and high tech drone quads, using those to be able to take those in. So mathematically, if you take it from a mathematics perspective, Nick, how much would it cost to be able to give the Ukrainians high tech weapons and use those as a war test to see how good they really are? We already know that the M1 Abrams is no good. Do you know where the M1 Abrams that we gave to Ukraine are sitting? They're sitting in shelters. And the reason they're sitting in shelters is, and I think I may have even pointed this out in one of my shows, is because the M1 tank is can be devastated by drones. So they can't use the M1 tanks. And plus they had the amount of fuel that they need and maintenance and everything else that they need. It was just too much for the Ukrainians to take in and be able to use those against the Russians. So they're sitting in shelters. So these are all the things that need to be taken into consideration whenever you're talking about mathematics and statistics and all those different areas.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we do have the star of the Ukraine Russia China show with us, Sasha Star. You may be able to highlight a little bit more about what's going on in the Ukraine. I get different reports. I get reports that Ukraine is doing very well, and I get reports that Russia's doing well. So, what is the reality? It's hard to determine. So,
It's a very possible that you have conflicting reports because in some ways, yes, Russians are moving very slowly ahead, losing tons of people, at least 1,200 a day, and sometimes they're taking 3 meters advance, 5 meters, sometimes 75 meters, but it doesn't closely even justifying the uh, losses what they incur. Now, Ukrainian is doing well, as Chris correctly said, that they are much more already technologically advanced than Russians, and Western companies already trying to learn from Ukrainians and even organizing joint ventures to produce very advanced drones. And in that respect, Ukrainians are on a forefront. Now, recently, Europeans realized that if Ukraine will be overrun, or guess what? A peace will be negotiated and there will be stoppage of war. The next is Europe. All what keeps Russian armies to invade Europe is a fight with Ukraine. They cannot advance anywhere without somehow either destroying Ukraine or agreeing to some kind of a peace negotiated or not, or whatever. So they need to resolve Ukrainian problem, and then they already have plans how to invade Baltic states, starting with Estonia, and they already have maps where they're going ahead. And by the way, Estonians are taking apart their streets, so the Russian technique, tanks, etc., they will not be so easy to advance ahead. So that's why, unfortunately, they are destroying their own streets in Estonia. And other Baltic states are well informed that they are next in line. So Ukraine is not only defending for themselves, they are defending for the freedom of other European countries. Of course, position of, let's see, country like France and country like Estonia are very different. So there is even question whether NATO will fight for Estonia if it will be invaded but by Russians. It's a big question, and Russians are eager to test the resolve of NATO, resolve of United States of America, who are scared to death of a nuclear attack by Russian. So that's why they are tasting a will of all NATO alliance, and especially United States. Are you dare to do any unfriendly actions against Russia? You know what the payback is. Go ahead. make my day. This is very, very difficult situation.
Okay. We have also on our show the timeshare show, and Irene Parker has joined us. This will be following the media show on the Pod TV network. Tell us what you have in the United States coming up on the timeshare show immediately following the media show. What do you have, Irene?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about Timeshare Solution or Surrender. We are volunteers with a timeshare and resort developer accountability, a 501c4 that supports people who feel they have been harmed by timeshare. I'm very glad to see Chris Greco in the show, and I'm going to cut right to the reason why I started this effort in 2015, because so many of our active duty service members are finding their security clearances in jeopardy because of a timeshare loan default. And Andrew was on our show 2 or 3 times. He served 10 years with the Air Force National Guard, and he was in the process of transferring from the Idaho to the Utah when he unfortunately attended a Westgate Resorts presentation and purchased a 4-bedroom timeshare that he says was sold as a rental investment, which is impossible. Reading the contract would not have helped him because the contract said he can rent. So I composed a white paper of 20 active duty service members, including someone working at the Pentagon, that has on a recording a Wyndham sales agent offering him a 4% interest rate because of the GI Bill. And it's, I just don't know why I've been yelling from the mountaintops to the Department of Defense. I've submitted through their hotline. They were very, very nice, I have to say, but I just can't see how we can let someone's military career be involuntarily separated from service because they bought a timeshare. And
I mean, if you don't mind me chiming in just for a second, I'm sorry, ma'am.
Absolutely.
But let me tell you, you're exactly right. So I was an Air Force officer. So there were times when I was also the IG for a major unit in the United States. And a guy called me up one time and he says, sir, I'm going to be leaving for Germany and I want to sell my house. And I said, okay, well, good luck. And he goes, well, no. The Air Force is going to sell it for me. I said, no, sir, they will not sell it for you. I can give you a realtor and I can get you in touch with a realtor, but there's no way that the Air Force is going to buy your home so you can go to Germany and then, resell the home. We do not do that. The Air Force, Army, Marine Corps, none of the services, Department of Defense, we just don't do that. And he goes, well, I was told I said, there is no truth to that effect. I am so sorry that he says, I got to leave in a month. And I said, I've been faced with the same situation you've been faced with, and it stinks, but you got to get a realtor, and then you got to figure out who's going to be at your closing because you have to report to Germany in the month. You have to either figure out to take your family or not. This is the situation that happens. And you're right. It's the communication aspect. And I'll tell you something about the GI Bill is using that GI Bill for things like that, or using the VA loan aspect for things like that. The VA doesn't just they don't just throw out a home loan. They want to inspect that house. They want to make sure that you have the right financing. They want to make sure everything is correct before they're going to give you that VA loan. So there's a lot of specific steps to go to. And I'm really, really happy that you're doing something about this timeshare. I have 3 friends of mine who literally had a timeshare and are still trying to this day, and it's been 10 years for them to try to get out of that timeshare. I've lost touch with them, but basically, I'm hoping that they can get on your show or figure out your show is there, because man, I'll tell you, that is a big hit on your credit rating. That's a big hit on any type of thing. You're right. You could get dishonorably discharged. You're responsible for those finances. Nobody else is. So I'm glad you're doing that. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah.
So military folks are probably extra at risk from timeshare pitches, because in the military, you put yourself in a hierarchy, and you expect the hierarchy to do right by you for the most part. You're giving you're giving yourself to the U.S. military. The U.S. military wants to treat you right for what you're giving up to be part of it, and they will, they have your best interests in mind for the most part. And so when you run into bad actors who put themselves in a position of authority over you, you might fall for their bullshit more easily because you come out of a military structure. I love occasionally getting practice and standing up to bullshit. Like I'll go by Scientology and let them try to recruit me. It's a hard sell, and they get pissed when you say no thank you. It's the same for timeshare. If you can stand up to them and say no after 2 hours of them cajoling you and then yelling at you.
They sold it in Spain. It's illegal what they do here in the United States. We'll go to Bangladesh, the World Talent Economic Forum. Dr. Sharif, what do you have coming up?
And Nick, I'm going to have to go to
You're
get
on the
ready
show.
for my
Right,
show.
Thanks for showing up.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. This is really interesting discussions, and recently I get chance to work with some of the research activities in Bangladesh with MIST. But definitely USA has more valuable research project, especially for the defense. I want to learn more about like how US defense contribute for innovating new technology, especially for drone and all of the things. As you are from US Air Force, maybe it will be interesting for my students because I have many want to learn more about US cultures and US Air Force culture and all of the things.
Well, the interesting thing about the drones is that, and I'm really surprised they have not done this, the Russians or the Ukrainians for that matter, is that there are anti-drone, there are literally anti-drone products out there. I think at one time some defense contractors were actually working on those, where you'd see the drone coming. You could aim like it looked like a gun, but basically it was EMF is what it was. It was or EMP, electromagnetic pulse type thing, and you would fire it at that drone. And the minute you fired it at the drone, you could take over that drone. Now, the way the Russians are countering that is that they are not having anything emit from the drone. They're just plugging in a latitude, longitude, and they're literally plugging in maps. And then they're just letting it loose, and that's why it's hitting. It's just like the V2 rocket in Nazi Germany. They're just throwing drones at Ukraine, in a general sense, like Kyiv or something like that, and then they're just hoping that it hits something, which it will eventually. So our drone is something different, right? From that standpoint, is that we actually try to put GPS in different areas in that drone area, so that now we can get more surgical in those strikes.
Hey, Chris, and definitely Dr. Sharif as well. You were asking how folks are learning. I imagine they're doing the same thing in Bangladesh, but you can correct me if I'm wrong and everything. But I know that there are a number of kids here. As a matter of fact, I was at a recent festival, and there was a whole robotics group that was there and everything. So a lot of our young people are becoming involved in these robotics clubs so they can learn about the skills about drones and things along those lines. So they are actually learning how to develop little miniature robots. And there was even one that was at the Cultural Arts Center that I worked at. But right now we're going through leadership change and everything. But I do know that there are a number of these robotic competitions. As a matter of fact, I saw one, I think it was about 2 or 3 days ago, and they're building like these very intricate robots, but they can get around and do all kinds of amazing things, kind of like what Chris was talking about. So one of the ways that our kids is learning is through these clubs that are targeted in that kind of education.
So a question for Chris. So if you took a drone, and gave it an AI brain and gave it an objective and had it present as a bird, that would be pretty tough to detect, right?
Yes, as long as you gave it also a heartbeat and a warm body, which you could actually put those into play along with flapping wings that would not do anything other than just flap. I mean, it wouldn't actually produce any lift whatsoever. But the heat signature would have to match that of a bird, and it would have to have some type of sonic appearance as a bird. And I think once you did that, yeah, you could definitely do that. Let me give you an example of what the Navy does, Rick. And this is interesting. They still do it to this day because the Navy does not ever let 200 years of progress interfere with tradition. So here's what they do. They'll go out into the middle of the ocean. And they'll sit there and they'll say, you know, there's subs out there. There's adversarial subs, there's satellites, there's all kind of different things that are out there. They will present a battleship or a frigate or a missile cruiser, whatever else, in the electronic signature of an aircraft carrier. So they will make that thing look like an aircraft carrier. So when the satellite, and they'll do it at night basically. So when the satellite comes on play or whatever else, it will read that signature as an aircraft carrier. And it will even be able to give it engine noises and things that would make it look like the USS Teddy Roosevelt. When it is in fact
so we have a further question. So we've got AI coming on. You know, everything is all AI all the time. It seems like now would be the time for Russia and the U.S., except Russia's run by an a-hole, and you know the U.S. has its own. But to reduce our nuclear stockpiles, because it seems like AI is inherently destabilizing, and the U.S. and Russia each have like 1,700 warheads that are deployable, that are supposedly ready to go, and we should not. I feel like we should be doing arms talks because. What do you think?
So arms talks. Just 1 second. Let me get back to Dr. Sharif's question about that. So Dr. Sharif, basically what's happening is this with the drone aspects and with all the other aspects that have to go along with this, is that we are teaching more and more. In fact, the FAA has a drone test, and I teach the drone class and teach drone tests and those types of things. So more and more 13, 14, 15-year-olds are working drones. They're literally working more and more drones. Now, the problem with all this is innovation. Like Rick, like I'm about to talk about with Rick. Basically, what happens is that you can use a drone in conjunction with a Wi-Fi receiver, and you can put that drone at 500 feet, and you can make it a Wi-Fi receiver. You can even make it a cell tower. If you had enough on that drone, you had a big enough drone, you could actually make it a cell tower. Now, what does that do? You can make it a satellite reception area. What does that do? Well, you take the floods, you take the natural disasters, you take even urban natural disasters, like what happened in Bangladesh. The building caved in at one point. You could actually use drones to be able to have communication availability and put that up above 400 feet. And now all of a sudden you got yourself a tower, a homemade tower that will help to be able to make that communication flow.
Fire spotting in LA.
Fire spotting or shot spotting, which is the guns and everything like that. Hey, Chris, I did have a question based on since you're a data guy, there is a data app that I've been using lately, since y'all were talking about birds earlier and all along those lines. But unfortunately, as you know, there can also be false positives and all along those lines. So there is an app called Merlin. It is basically an app that allows you to find the birds based on their bird calls and everything like that. So I've been using that app, and it'll tell you whether you got a robin or a cardinal or a mourning dove or whatever the other bird is and everything. But I know that about a week and a half ago, I was going and pressed my button, because you got to keep the speakers clear in order for the birds to be heard and everything like that. I was actually using it yesterday, and I think it detected about 5 birds. But I heard what was chirping. It was plainly chirping. It was plainly animals and all along those lines. But the app was not identifying it at all, because the Merlin app is basically only going to identify, because that's what it's been programmed to do, birds. And they also have the birdcount.org, so you can put the birds into a bigger app that is doing this worldwide study of bird migration using common citizens and all along those lines. But I'm sitting there going like, what the heck are these animals? And I realized that it was either cicadas, because I am in the South, or tree frogs, but they were not going to be identified because they were not in the formula that they would have. But they would have the formulas and the different bird songs, but they're not going to have the songs of the different insects.
Right. I mean, so I think, Rick, your question was about AI, correct?
Like, do we have any shot at getting some arms reduction before AI really gets all ensconced in our systems?
Okay, so I would like to, I guess wants and needs are different. Have you ever read The Prisoner's Dilemma, Rick, by Poundstone, right?
Oh,
So
yeah,
you've read
I
that.
know the issue, whether you sell out your buddies or, yeah.
So there's also a game, they don't call it a game, they call it a simulation, whatever you want to call it. Win as much money as you can. You can actually look that up. Win as much money as you can. Get a bunch of people together for a party. I guarantee you that half of them will walk away hating your guts. It's win as much money as you can. That is an absolutely 100% simulation of what it's like to do arms control. And I'm going to tell you from a perspective of an intelligence guy that in the 70s and the 80s, we tried this with Russia, Soviet Union at that time. And our deal was, we'll get rid of 1,500 if you get rid of 1,500. And so they said, okay, fine. U.S., we're going to bring in Soviet atomic energy people, and they're going to take a look and make sure that you destroy 1,500. Fine. They came in, we destroyed whatever it was, 1,500, 1,000, whatever it was. We destroyed it in front of them, blew it up, did whatever we needed to do. We went back to Russia, said, okay, we're going to go back. We're going to go to Soviet Union. We need to do whatever we're going to do. And the Soviet Union said, we got kind of a problem here. These are very secret areas. And, we're going to have to, you can bring in one person, but that person is going to be shadowed by one of our people to make sure that you guys aren't just taking pictures or doing whatever you need to do. They ended up destroying like 500. So it's like, wait a minute, we destroyed 1,000, you destroyed 500. So, we're getting to the 1,000. We're getting there. But in the meantime, while we destroy those other 500, can you destroy another 500 of yours? Well, wait a minute, you haven't gotten to the 1,000 yet, and you want us to destroy. Well, yeah, but we're going to actually destroy 500 here, and then what we're going to do is you destroy 500 more. And this is not. This is not like I'm making this up. This is actual, honest to God. This is what the Soviets were like. And there was a joke that went around during the START talks that said that if the Soviet Union and the U.S. were in a two-person running race, and the U.S. placed first, and the Soviet Union placed second, they would state that the U.S. would say, this is it, we placed first, the Soviet Union placed second. The Soviet Union would say, we placed second, and the United States placed second to last. That is the way they felt. And Rick, they still, not the people, I don't think. The people are kind of pushed around, but Putin he's an ex-KGB guy. He believes that way. Do you know that in the movie The Hunt for Red October, do you know what the name of the KGB guy's name was in the on the submarine that the Soviet captain killed? His name was Putin.
Okay.
Yeah, so he was a KGB. His name was
Plus, Putin has an inferiority complex.
Right.
When he was KGB, he was like in a little podunk East German kind of posting, and he's very dedicated to reestablishing the Soviet Empire and his own glory. Yeah, he feels like the fall of the Soviet Union was a tragedy, and he's trying to bring it back.
Hey, I'm all for it. Let him bring it back. Then we have just one enemy. I mean, I'm sick of this. Everyone's an enemy thing. I'd like to have one solid. It was nice being an intelligence guy in the Cold War. We had one enemy. Boy, we were focused on that enemy. The Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union. It was so nice to have this focus. And then about the mid '80s to late '80s, then all of a sudden it got into terrorism stuff. It was like, oh shoot, here we go. Then we went all over.
But doesn't he understand that a lot of the world wants nothing to do with it? Look at the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. They want nothing to do with the Russian way of life. Hungary, they used to be part of the Comecon. They don't want anything to do with the Russians. Neither does Czechoslovakia. Neither does Ukraine. I mean, have they thought that their way of life isn't what most of the world wants? Although Putin and his crazies have said that they want unconditional surrender from Ukraine.
Yeah.
Ukraine's got to be crazy to allow Russia to come and rape them for free. What really gets me, though, isn't that. What really gets me is China and India supporting them. That really gets me. And that's one reason I don't have problems with huge tariffs on both those two countries, because they are the ones that are supporting the Russian regime of terror. And as long as they do that, we should never trade with China. We should never trade with Russia. I mean, China or India. Forget them.
Yeah. So this is a lot of people. I like lexicography. I like to be able to go back to origins of things. A lot of people don't realize the Molotov cocktail. The origins of the Molotov cocktail came from the USSR going against Finland. And basically what happened is that they said, Molotov, who was the foreign minister for Soviet Union at that time, he said, we are going to start, instead of destroying Finland, we're going to start to throw food at Finland. We're going to just drop food in on them. And the Finnish were like, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden they started dropping bombs, and they were bombing the Finns. And the Finland said, something, this is ridiculous. So they started actually making these gasoline bottles with rags hanging out of them, and they were throwing them. And they were saying, if Molotov is giving us food, then we're going to give him the cocktails to go with the food. And that's where Molotov cocktail came from. That's where the origin of that. And that shows exactly what the Soviet Union is like, and what Russia is like currently, even though the people are sitting back saying, oh, we're really not like that. Yeah, you are, because your leaders are giving you are setting the pace with which you're doing whatever you're doing. So yeah, you're right, Rick. I mean, it's a situation where it's the prisoner's dilemma, all these areas where, yeah, we're doing what we need to do to be able to make that happen. But, Russia doesn't believe in that stuff, because if they do that, it's going to make them weak and people are going to end up dying. So.
Yeah. Chris, I have very basic question. I just want to learn more about the culture, especially US Air Force culture. Let's say you see some talented from any college or from any university, and they are talented, they have passionates about to innovate drone or new technology, let's say artificial intelligence. So is there any opportunity to US Air Force, or they naturally collaborate with like people from college or from university, or what is the culture of US Air Force? I'm more interested about the culture. It's very basic, I can understand, but
so we have the Air Force had a program, and I think the program is still in effect, called Education with Industry, where you take an active duty Air Force, usually Air Force officer, and you take that individual and you put them into a situation where they are literally with a major industrial partner. Usually, it's an offshoot of the government contractor, but basically they can pick. There are a ton of people that want to see very talented Air Force personnel that usually have advanced degrees, masters or PhDs, that they want to have working with them, because then they can understand the military culture, and the individual that's military can understand the civilian culture. So that was education from the industry. Like I said, I think it's still there. And there are all kind of scholarships that are available to work with different foreign countries also. Spain, Italy, Argentina, It used to be Venezuela, but I don't think Venezuela does that anymore. But there's different countries that allow Air Force officers to go to their armed forces for a year. I think it's a year, and then they take a look at that and they learn the language and do whatever they need to do. So I'm almost, I mean, if Bangladesh has an air force, which they do, um, it's very interesting how they could literally go into the U.S. Air Force and say, "Hey, we want to have a U.S. Air Force officer here in Bangladesh, and in return, we're going to give a Bangladesh to go to the U.S. Air Force for a year." And it's kind of like a switching of roles for that standpoint. It's really good. It's a really good program.
Excellent program. Excellent program.
Yeah.
I really want to know more about this program. It's very
I just want to beat up the Soviet Union one more time. Now, this was years ago, but since I just got back from Budapest a couple of weeks ago, Budapest, excuse me. I'm going to Prague next week, which is Prague. But when I was in Budapest, how about this? This was the liberation by the Soviet Union. 150,000 rapes in Hungary by the Soviet Union once they liberated Hungary from Germany. 150,000 rapes by the Russians. Now, did that mean all the Russians were bad? No, there's actually incidental stories where actually the Russians were very kind and nice to the Hungarians people. So there were some officers that were good. But in the meantime, the vast majority of them, I mean, they just raped all the women that were there. And why would anyone want a country like that imposed upon them? Why would any country like India and China support a country that does that? And why would the United States even consider this to be a good thing? And why does the world consider this to be a good thing? Now, why does Iran support them? This is not Islamic culture, unless they believe in the indiscriminate rapes of women. The Islamic culture that I know don't believe in that. So, the world has a serious problem, and I don't think the U.S. has been really strong in addressing the problems between Ukraine and Russia. And frankly, even the West in Russia, it's totally different. Now, I've been to Russia. When I was there, it was pretty peaceful, nice. Got along with my little pancake person. She was really sweet. But at the same time, the government is totally removed for reality as to how the rest of the world sees Russia. And that's one reason Ukraine won't give up until probably the last person in Ukraine's dead. Because your choice is either die or be raped. What do you want to do? A lot of them are going to choose death, or they're going to fight to the death. And that's just the way it is. And I think that the U.S. has not been really forceful enough against the Russian aggression. That would be my opinion.
Well, first of all, you're right, Nick. First of all, we lost our opportunity. We lost the opportunity when they had 100,000 troops in that border. We should have immediately said, if one bullet goes across that border, one bullet goes across the border, the UN is going to take adversarial action against the Russians, and that's going to be it. Now, the problem is we tried that in Korea. And in Korea, when it happened, the UN was fresh. And we said, look, we need to go in and have a police action against North Korea, who had just invaded South Korea. And the Russians, who were part of the Security Council, said, maybe, yeah, we agree in principle, but that's about it. With the Ukraine, when the UN tried to do that, the Russians says, nope, we veto. And because we veto, any Security Council measure is now vetoed. And that's the way the UN works. And that's why the UN is a failure. An abject failure in that area is because if they would have put UN troops immediately across that border, I guarantee you that Putin would have said, you know something, now this sucks. I'm not going against Ukraine anymore. I'm going against the freaking world. This is not going to be a win-win situation for me at all. I'm just not going in there. And he would have either withdrawn the troops or thrown a couple artillery shells over top, and that would have been it. But we lost that. Once we lost that opportunity, it was done. He thought, nobody's reacting to me. Same thing happened in Kuwait. When Kuwait was invaded, the U.S. said, and the UN said, well, he's really not going to invade Kuwait. We're not going to worry about it. He invaded Kuwait, and all of a sudden, we went all nutsy cuckoo and then put troops into play and everything else. So I think what happens is in those situations is correct. You're correct, Nick. Also, I spoke to a Hungarian. The Hungarians, do you realize that you cannot, there is no other country on the face of the earth that speaks Hungarian other than Hungary? If you speak Hungarian, you are basically an isolated language. No other country speaks it. So, and the Hungarian said, I speak Hungarian, so what? Other than if I'm in Hungary, I can speak it. But if I'm anywhere else in the world, nobody else speaks it. So they made themselves isolated from a language perspective, and and they're making themselves isolated from a leadership perspective, because now they're pulling themselves back because of the amount of grain that Ukraine was shipping over, and it was cutting into the Hungary grain exports. So now they're having a heck of a time with that, trying to say, hey, we don't want Ukraine to have any freaking exports, because that's our exports. So now you're cutting into my $1.50. So now I got a problem with it. So what's his name? Urban.
Orban.
Yeah, he's got and he's got he's got a Soviet type background.
He has a different mentality over there. But the trains do run on time. I can show you pictures of the train. You love it, Chris. They're right from the Soviet Union. They're tiny little narrow yellow trains that run up and down Budapest. And I'm sitting there going, you've got to be kidding. They're not your modern, sleek Japanese, Chinese, even Spanish, Aves or Renfreys. They're tiny little trains. And they still have a lot of housing that's left over from the Soviet Union. It's further out from Pest, but there are all these block homes. I mean, the good news, I guess, if there's anything, there's very little homeless people in Hungary right now. But it's kind of cute that they still have a lot of remnants of the old Soviet Union you can see in that particular country. But really got me, because there was a great book that was written on this that I'm reading. It's called Budapest, okay? And it's by this guy, Stadist. Anyway, he just describes how hard it is to live in a place like Hungary, which is invaded by the Ottoman Empire, taken over by Austria, become part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Then the Germans took them. Then the Soviet Union took them. And now finally, they're tinier, but at least they're part of the European Union. And they seem to be doing okay. But what really got me is the spoilage of war. 150,000 of their women were raped by Soviet armies. That was their liberation. And, why are we supposed to applaud that? And I think the Ukrainians who've had problems in the past with the Russians realize if the Russians come in, it's not just the real estate they're taking. They will destroy the Ukrainian people. They'll kill the men, rape the women. There's nothing left for Ukraine. I'm shocked that they don't arm their entire citizenship to go after the Russians. I just don't understand why the stance is so non-aggressive when it comes to the Russians.
I mean, I don't understand it either, but understand also that the Ukrainians were hand in hand with the Nazis during World War II, because they felt that they were being liberated by the Nazis, against the Soviet hammer. So they decided that, hey, this is what we're going to do. They provided guards for the concentration camps. They did a lot of things that they're taking a look back now and thinking, geez, this is part of our history. And then they took Soviet prisoners in Ukraine and treated them extremely bad. So now, true, that's 80 years ago, right?
I know.
But they have a long, as you know, Nick, Europe has a long memory. They don't have like 20, 30 year, 40 years. Oh, it's okay. They have 500-year-old memories, and they vengeance on those 500 years. I mean, I had an Italian tell me one time that the French kidnapped the Pope, and I said, oh my God, when did they do that? He said, about 500 years ago. I said, it might be time to let that one go. I mean, it's but that was the Babylonian era. But they have a very, very long memory. So it's all about, I'm going to attack you because you're going to attack me. You're going to attack me because you're going to attack me. The French in World War I. And right now, this is a World War I endeavor. There's trench warfare. little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. It's going to go on for about 20, 30 years unless somebody comes to the table and says, okay,
Well, or there's a change in the power structure in the Soviet Union, in other words, or Russia, whatever they do, which might happen. We just don't know when or if that's going to happen. So that means that the Sasha show is going to go on for quite some time. As I told Sasha, I said, the show ends probably when the war is, and if the war is over, the show is continue. It's quite interesting that they'll actually have warfare going on like this in the modern era. I mean, the thing is, they can't come to the peace table and figure this one out. It's really mind-boggling, But what happened in Hungary, they did try to liberate themselves from the Germans several times. Chris, what happens the last time they did it? Germany sent 4 Panzer units into Buda, which is their capital, not Pest, and kicked all the Hungarians out. They just took it over again. So the Hungarians really had a choice to basically serve the Nazis. That was their choice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that is
quite
true. Although the Hungarians had a partisan, the Yugoslavs and the Hungarians had the best partisan underground in the entire war. The Yugoslavians were so good that they had literally 4 Panzer or 6 Panzer divisions in Yugoslavia that they had to be able to try to put down that partisan aspect. And remember, Attila the Hun is Hungary. I mean, that's where Attila the Hun came from. So I mean, they can be very warlike, and they can do the things that need to be done. But it's really interesting that you're right. And in Estonia, getting back to Estonia real quick, Estonia, per population, for the density of their population, has given the most money to Ukraine of any other country. I mean, given their population and density and whatever else. Also, they're the only ones in that area that were hacked by the Russians, although the Russians said they never did it. They were hacked by the Russians because Estonia was totally electronic. Everything coming out of Estonia was electronic. Their driver's license, their bank accounts, whatever else.
They're very advanced technology.
They were hacked. And man, once they were hacked, they couldn't do anything, nothing. Their entire country had to shut down for a period of 24 to 48 hours while they tried to counter this hacking thing. But the Russians, and I kind of blame the Russians on this one. It may not be them, but they're awfully close. I mean, and that's where if there's going to be an invasion, the first thing they're going to hit is your electronics, totally and completely wipe it out, and then they're going to come in with their arms because you won't be able to communicate.
Right. Yeah, and then they can really shut down water, sewer, electricity. If they shut down your vitals, then the things it's easier to conduct an invasion. See all the fun you missed, Sharif, by being in Bangladesh? It's called the European Wars. As a matter of fact, in the United States, one thing that a lot of the politicians said, we should avoid the European wars. Even Woodrow Wilson was saying, he kept us out of war. In other words, kept us out of World War I. And so the U.S. has a very strong history of wanting to stay out of wars. At the same time, the U.S. keeps getting drawn into wars because it's almost like we can't avoid it, so it's a big problem. But it's good to see that Bangladesh is a very peaceful country, and you guys don't have the problems that they do in Europe, at least to our knowledge, but we don't know. Yeah.
Bangladesh Army actually contribute a lot for UN peacekeeping mission, but definitely we are very good ally for USA. And personally, I learned a lot. Even today's your 2 sessions, excellent. Previously with Honorable David Walker, and today right now with Chris. How should I say? Whenever I go to my classroom or with my seminar as a keynote speakers, it's how I get favored or how I get helped by my US friend. It's actually amazing. I can understand why it is not good, but some point you have to apply it to save your country or save any communities. I believe that how I learned today's sessions, how US Air Force and all of the things apply, even though Bangladesh Army can learn from there. I already share with our commanders, like who is the chief of the education institutions. they also can learn the culture, the new culture. Actually, every time we can learn from USA. That is the beauty of USA. I always believe that they always motivate, nurture the young people, and they go for innovation. That is the beauty of USA. I
Yeah.
always
Well, also the pay is much higher here than it is even in Spain. I'll tell you that a couple friends of mine went to the U.S. to go to work. One is in the PhD program at University of Colorado, and he's a graduate assistant. Usually, graduate assistants in universities don't get paid very well, but in the U.S., his pay is twice as much as the average Spaniard. So the thing is that the pay, and so what happens, a lot of people in Spain, if they get a job in the US, they go to the US because, frankly, the US pays more than they do in Spain. I mean, seriously, twice as much you can earn. And maybe over there, if you get a job in the US teaching as a graduate assistant, you may make 10 times more than you would in Bangladesh. I mean, it's just amazing, you know, the difference in pay between the U.S. and other countries. So with that, Jacoby's here, but he's quiet, which is quite unusual for him. I don't even know how we did that. He heads up the Gamers Den, and I don't know if he has any contributions on World Edition. Way too much, spouting the progressive cause. So Jacoby, you have anything interesting coming up this week? You can be on.
Nothing really that interesting. I mean, I'm out driving around right now, and I got somebody in the back who's sitting here just yelling and yelling and yelling and talking and talking and talking. So that's why I've been mainly on mute. There were some things I was going to interject in, but that's okay. I mean, it's been a good discussion today. Nothing really super exciting on my end or that wanted to add in. I mean, I could drop in a few things here and there, but we're at the end of the hour, so gotta have fun.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we're about at the hour, so the thing is we probably should get going. We do want to thank our special guest who was on, Chris Greco, who we haven't seen for a while, Dr. Sharif. Also, the Timeshare show is going to be coming up right afterwards. And so we'll see you next week on the media show. In the meantime, have a good week. Bye-bye.